Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
Detroit is Different, back in full effect, another podcast, and this time I'm show swapping. It's been a long time coming. I'm talking about somebody that puts in the work, telling so many of the stories and content in and around Detroit from so many different perspectives: community, business, gardening, just a lot of different things. We talking Daily Detroit. Jeremiah, how you today?
I am excellent. It is an honor to be in this studio, sir.
Oh, man. It's been a long time coming. Last year I was on yours. We were talking a little bit about the fundraiser for a lot of studio. This time, the show swap, we had an event at the policy conference together. And somebody that connects to Daily Detroit also just came on through Devin. And I was like, man, it's been time to get you in the mix. So here we are.
It's a neighborhood-to-neighborhood swap.
Yes. Yeah, it's really not very far. So Daily Detroit Studios, like when I say this, I mean, they're like, a good bike ride, a pretty long walk, but a drive is like that, like almost like so close that you would be surprised that all this podcasting is going on around these parts of Detroit's, I don't know, I'm going to say Detroit's west side, even though technically I
am on the east side, and
yes,
here is the thing.
Technically.
Yeah, the east side, look, even though it's like a couple of blocks, I had to stay on the east side. I had to stay true to my roots.
So let's get into those roots, man. We usually always start with Detroit story. What brought your family here? What settled everybody in Detroit?
Oh, gee. So there's two sides of the family, of course, mom and dad.
Yep.
So mom's family were coal miners in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Back in the 1800s.
Okay, wait. What parts of Pennsylvania?
I want to say like Appalachia, that area. Sykesville, actually, now that I remember.
Okay.
And they came here, of course, for industrial work, right? And this is like everyone came migrating to Detroit because there were so many jobs. And what happened with my family is they're a big Catholic family, right? Like every one of my relatives, except for my generation, has like 50,000 children. Like my mom has 11 sisters and brothers.
Wow.
Right? So they lived that lifestyle. But they also got very active in regards to the community. So, for instance, I have a great uncle who was a Detroit Health Commissioner back in the day. My great aunt was the first female vice president of a major union, the UAW and the CLUW. Always an idea of service to the community in one way or another on the east side. And on my dad's side, it's kind of an interesting twist because we don't know all the details. But my grandmother ran away from home in Maryland because her father forbade her to go to college. So she ran away to Montreal. And she met my grandfather there, who was basically studying to become a minister, and ended up being a deacon at St. Columba Church on the far east side, over there by like Marlborough and Jefferson back in the day. And so those two families, they intersect and they meet on the east side right there near Jefferson. Like my dad's grandmother lived over on Dickerson.
All right, so much more in that story, and that's why I love starting with these origin stories. Okay, around what time is this when your grandmother gets to Montreal?
I want to say the late 1920s.
Okay,
because my dad's an older generation, so my dad was born in the 30s.
Okay,
so my dad was as old as most people's grandparents.
So being that you said the 1920s, around that time, it's like the Great Depression going on. This is like the dip between World War I and World War II. Well, really, like I guess like the start, now that I think about it, of one, if I'm correct. But I'm just more so saying, like, for a woman to be that brave, that takes a lot of courage, adventure. It's not like Google was around. You know what I'm saying? Like, how did she even go about navigating something like that?
Well, I got to tell you, when she died, she had a stack of speeding tickets from going up north to visit her daughter. Because she's just that kind of bold person. She didn't. A risk worth taking means that there's going to be some risk to it. And so she was somebody who liked to step firmly on whatever that she was going to do. And she wasn't going to be stopped by some, antiquated, rule. I mean, she was born in 1909. Think about how different our culture was.
Yeah.
Although it isn't that long away in human history. You know, and so for her, it was something where she just felt that she needed to do it, that she didn't want to just, you know, end at 8th grade and be somebody's, you know, wife and don't have any, just a wife and no additional contribution to society. Of course, she was glad to get married, glad to have a couple of kids, but it wasn't just about that. So in a lot of ways, you know, she was before her time, and she valued learning and history. You know, she was actually the historian for Indian Village for many years.
Wow.
Working out of one of the basements over there.
And this is so unique because, like, when I get these stories, it just further paints the picture of some of the people here, but also just more the stories of human beings, because we'll get these snapshots and I think we can romanticize certain figures, but this still takes a lot of courage. And then, like I say, it's no, you know, it's no apps, it's no Uber to get to Montreal. Then I'm assuming also,
No
you know,
planes, none of that. Right?
yeah, you know, and I can only imagine just winters then to now and how that was. Do you know what brought her there and why she chose so far away from Maryland to Montreal? That's a big leap.
Well, her dad was a state Supreme Court justice, so you go to another country when he's out of his jurisdiction.
Okay. That makes sense. So this, and then you also mentioned like giving back in the Catholic Church. I don't think a lot of people kind of tie into this, but I just know a couple people that have definitely been in Catholic religions and understand so much more in the parish system, giving back, like the structure of it, as much as I definitely know, you know, is everybody watching, you know, it's the duality of life. It's definitely been a lot of things associated with many forms of religion, especially like the amount of wealth connected to that church that definitely can be like, all right, what's going on here? But also some of the works within that church, it built systems that helped a lot of European immigrants at a time when, I guess, whiteness, quote unquote, was not what it's become as time has went on.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, so now we're talking about my mom's side of the family. So one of the big dramas in my family was that my dad's side was Episcopal and my mom's side was Catholic, and that was a no-no even into the 80s. That was a no-no alone. So we're talking about my mom's side and the Catholic side, and that's not something I really, like, I don't practice any of that. Like, that's history, but I still have aunts and uncles that are very involved, all that kind of stuff. And there is a duality to it. There is both a mix of all the things that we now know, but all the community supports that were there because government didn't provide those supports. The idea that government provides any sort of safety net to us is a very new innovation in America. This isn't something that we culturally like have. It's like these are things that the church is supposed to do to help with immigrants and things like that. And the whole scale amongst white people of, you know, different, you know, ethnicities and religions and what do you know, what language do you speak and all that other stuff. Yeah, I think about, you know, you've heard the story of how the term melting pot came together, right?
No, please share.
Okay, so this was we'll call it an invention by Henry Ford, very loosely. The idea is that when you worked for Ford's factories, you needed to conform to the American way. So when you say the term melting pot, what you're referring to is when they would take immigrant communities from all over the world, and of course they were working in these factories. Well, they had to be Americanized. They needed to lose speaking their religion or speaking their language. They needed to conform to American standards. They would have inspectors come by their house and see how they live to make sure they're living up to standards so that they could get their full pay. That's part of the origin of the union movement, is the idea that, you know, you have to, these things that today we're just like absolutely abhorred by. This is just what they did, like to be able to control culture through employment. And so a melting pot, this was something that actually existed, a giant pot. And outside of it, like they would do this ceremony, like I think it's once a year, but don't quote me on that. But it was a regular ceremony where you'd had these workers. They would come up to the pot in extremely stereotypical gear of where they're from. You know, so my mom's side is Slovak. So it'd be traditional Slovakian garb or something like that. Or if you were Irish or if you were whatever you were, you would go into the pot and inside there would be new clothes for you. The straw hat, the suit, all that stuff. And then you exit the pot as an American, leaving your past behind. That's the kind of legacy that Henry Ford gave us, on top of all of the other mechanical innovations and everything else, there was also this social dichotomy that I think still plays in our region today as part of the scars that many of us bear in different ways. And they're not, I don't mean to compare them. I really don't. But these are things that happened. And so like that's why I kind of resist using the term melting pot, because melting pot means you lose what you had.
That's deep. I've never heard that story, and I appreciate you sharing that. And like we say, just especially like being Black, it's always tough. Even until you go to a place like a New York or a DC where it's many people from the diaspora, you don't even understand the nuances of Blackness. But, you know, when you study history, you understand that whiteness is not, it's still like kind of like I guess you say social programming. Like it's a relatively new concept because America brought about the need for whiteness because, you know, so many people, as you say, like Polish, Irish, Italians, Jewish, like white kind of was like German, French, English, and then it started like consolidating around certain things and certain churches, as you say, would be safe havens to still kind of hold on to what forms of that culture, of tradition, of family that still existed.
And that's true with like the Greek Orthodox. You can name them all off. You know, it's interesting to me, the dichotomy. You're talking about like different things at the same time. People hail Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, as the guy who brought the Civil Rights Act, right? But he was also the guy who said if you want to get somebody to vote for you, point to somebody less than them. Get them to think that they're better than somebody less than them.
Yeah.
Help moving forward that concept that you're just talking about of, okay, now we're going to unite this way, and then we're going to other another group. Not that that group wasn't already othered, but it's all about like shifting people, because one of the easiest ways to get people to do something that you want them to do is to make them hate each other. Is to create an other. And it's used to manipulate in all kinds of different directions. And it's been throughout, not just American history, but if you listen to, say, the Revolutions podcast by Mike Duncan, which just wrapped up, there's great series on whether it's a French Revolution, the best in-depth on the Haitian Revolution that is often forgotten. So much of that is that othering. So much of that is we're going to create a group, and then we're going to go ahead and create barriers in an outgroup, and then that way we can take power.
And these social caste systems that in a lot of ways still exist today. Certain cultures like India is way more prevalent, Hong Kong and other places. And then this is still, you know, me with my own American understanding and tradition and conditioning of what that is, because even in America, there are so many caste-based systems because it doesn't seem like it, but we're close in age. During our lifetime, the wealth to poverty gap has exponentially widened. Like, and it doesn't seem like it because it's like right before our eyes, but the amount of disparity from Ronald Reagan to Joe Biden of, you know, who that 1%, really, it's almost like the 1% of the 1% having, you know, I would say untold riches. And then along that way, the caste systems that go into like who's connected to these people that do have like, I guess, levers of control and influence through banks and more wealth versus those that don't. It's surprising.
I think these patterns repeat throughout history.
Yeah.
They repeat. And what happens is that people have to be willing to fight for what they want and what they need. And I think sometimes you can give bread and circuses to the masses to pacify them. And I don't mean in like a violent way or anything like that, but I do mean in getting out the candidates that you want to get, being involved in the way you want to go. Like how many people today are lost into the TikTok scroll hole? And why is TikTok so popular? In part, and I was just listening to a show about this, in part because younger people are less and less active in wanting to hear about serious things happening out there. And so often, even our serious news conversation is focused on the wrong things. We're focused on the fight. We're focused on the dunk of the day. Meanwhile, the whole time, something else completely different is happening. And it's all there. You can see it. You just got to pay more attention to it than the 2 minutes that are packaged.
And with that kind of drives me into that with your parents and more your story. Then I definitely want to get into content because you're doing what I love to do. You're uncoding media. So your parents, what was your parents? Why did they choose to stay here? What connected them to the soil in the area?
Well, you know, I will fully admit that, and I know this from talking to my parents, that it wasn't expected I was going to happen. So my mom had me a lot older in life, and so did my dad. I wasn't expected, right? They were staying together in an apartment over, in that yellow building over there at Alter and Kercheval. It's still standing there, the cool, apartment building right there. Anyway, I wasn't expected. My mom was 40. Right. And in the 80s, that just the medical things weren't there. None of this was expected. And, they stayed in the area because they were both creatives in a lot of ways. So my mom was a poet and also worked at a flower shop in Midtown, lived in Midtown for a long time. My dad was a
Which flower shop?
I don't remember exactly off the top of my head,
Because I was going to say, was it that flower shop next to Union Street? I'm still mad Union Street closed. But
yeah, I'm still mad about that. I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
I mean, a lot of restaurants won't come back, but
no.
I'll kill for some Rasta wings right now.
What about the dragon eggs?
Oh man.
I got to figure out how to make those.
Yeah, I know.
I got to figure out how to make those. So my dad was a Plum Street artist. He was a bit of a traveler and travel. He's was a military vet. And
what did he serve?
He did Korea.
Okay.
So I mean, it was very late in that, and then he got out just before the Vietnam War because he had enough years in, and his CO
Thank God.
on the quiet was like, you have enough years. I'm not going to say what's ahead, but you should strongly consider.
Yeah.
Your future. And so he threw himself back into his art because he was never soldiering wasn't his thing. He worked doing special projects and things like that. It was a place for him to be in, because he was kind of unmoored.
And it's unique that you bring that up. I was just at this past weekend. Baba Wayne Curtis from Feed 'em Freedom Gardens, a war veteran from Vietnam, and then also, Tyree Guyton, another war veteran. It's a connection between artistry and some soldiers that definitely have served in the Korean War, as we know, that has a lot of ties to Michigan. Man, oh man, that was a very when you think of a conflict where America bombed the hell out of a nation, boy.
And then we forgot the people who went there, right?
That too.
We did not. That's kind of almost like the forgotten war in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So that was something where he embraced his art after that, and he actually was part of the Plum Street artist community. He lived over in Plum Street for a while. If people don't know, there used to be an artist colony where the DTE headquarters now stands, roughly, near the Cass Corridor there. And you can look online, see all kinds of pictures of it. So much of that tapestry where so many of those underground zines were created and that kind of thing.
So like 70s, 80s, or 60s?
I want to say 60s, 70s, because he went to Wayne State. Because he told me the story about the Bobcat he had at Wayne State.
Wow, he had a Bobcat?
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say your dad sounds like
all the things that you kind of stereotype
of a hippie or something.
Yeah, he's, I remember one time, and I could say the story now because he's gone, but I remember him sitting me down, being like, try whatever drugs you want, just don't do anything that messes with your heart, because once your heart stops, it's all
hilarious. I bet you your dad knew that Sugar Man dude probably.
Oh, I mean, there's so many people that I run into randomly. It's like, okay, all right, that's it. Whether that or on my mom's side.
Okay.
I met because my uncle ended up becoming. My uncle was, and he's gone too, but he was mayor of Sterling Heights back in the 80s for a while, and he was not I cannot endorse his politics in any way, shape, or form, or preferences. I'll just tell you the story that my auntie has. 4 cousins of mine. They're all black, mixed race, but they identify as black. And after she had the first kid, she was never allowed over his house anymore.
God damn. Yeah, I mean,
that tells you everything.
That happens a whole lot more than people think. Period. Especially back in the 80s. I have a homeboy that has a sister that married a white man, and his family ostracized him the minute that, so it was one of those weird things where he now because they've been married now, that was in the 80s. So they've been married, 30 plus years at this point, but his family is his black family. So it's you'll see, and I mean, he's and I'm definitely I guess you would say stereotypical. He looks like, you know what I'm saying? Mr. Drummond or something, you know what I'm saying? So you'll be at a cookout, and then it's damn, why Mr. Drummond there? And it's nah, he cool though, you know what I'm saying? So it's interesting just that is, where the spectrum of where society and the perspectives of so many people.
Yeah. And there's 2 interesting formative experiences for how I approach stories and talk to people in that. So one, I learned that through research that that mayor of Sterling Heights was responsible for a lot of the sprawl, a lot of sprawl that you see today. A big part of that was not including sidewalks. Why? Because undesirables use sidewalks. It was a way to keep people out.
Yeah.
Right? The things that we say about, we wonder why we have a bad transit system. That was by intent.
Yeah.
To keep people away from each other, to
Definitely.
make sure to preserve property values. And that's a story you'll go through. If you read Origins of the Urban Crisis, which I'm sure you have, you'll see that preserve property values thing used for so many things.
So being that your parents are like artists, and I guess definitely I'm using the term hippie, but in
That's
my
fair.
mind that would be, I'm assuming, what would be labeled as, but just taking on some ideas and challenging conformist ideals at the time when I'm thinking of 60s, 70s, 80s. How did that mesh? I'm guessing even just in family discussions, the thought process and perspectives of like your mother, your father versus like more conservative thinking, especially in the 80s when Ronald Reagan was ramping up and trickle down economics. What was that like?
I was obviously a kid. I think part of it is I wish I had known more because, truth be told, my mom died when I was 10. So a lot of it became, how do you survive as a single parent?
Yeah.
And so that's how those policies came through, right? And just the dealing of things and the mental stress that a lack of resources created. That there were just lots of things that I'm thankful for all the experiences that I had, but it's just that it manifested through that stress. It manifested through just trying to make it work and trying to pay the bills was a lot of that. It's somebody where I felt like I had my feet in two worlds. In fact, I feel like I have my feet in multiple worlds and sometimes feel at home in none.
Interesting.
Because like I've been in the city most of my adult life, but oftentimes, like obviously there are plenty of people over the years like you don't belong here.
Yeah. True.
Right? But like I was born in Hutzel Hospital.
Yeah.
Like my grandmother was over on Seminole. Like the whole thing is just like it's like you can never make anyone happy, so you have to step firmly with your own, like who you are and just go out there and go forward.
And then also for your father to be an artist, especially like an artist I love artists. You love artists. But artists, when you think of especially a man at that time raising a 10-year-old, that's going to be a whole another realm of like understanding, like in just I can only imagine like some of the people just like meeting your dad's friends, what that would have been like it just as a kid,
Yeah. I mean, it was something where it's like, so why is your dad painting somebody in the living room? Because that's just not normal activity for a lot of people. Like, why is that happening? Like, why is somebody sitting for a portrait? And there were a lot of challenges with that eventually, as things went on, he kind of lost the rails a little bit. Yeah. As I got older, because it was just very difficult. My grandmother did a lot to raise me. Not that my dad didn't try his hardest, but it's a lot.
And with that being said, what do you think like someone like your father would think of today's artist community? In my mind, from the outside looking in, it seems to be more of a habitat, and it's still a lot of strides as we definitely look at even the fight with the DIA to include more of the Detroit artists and so many other things going on there. But
yeah,
what do you think he would think of some of the things happening today? Like it feels as though it's not so much of a blue collar town, and some culture is oozing through a little bit more.
It's funny you talk about the DIA. I have a childhood memory of going there and my dad not getting his piece in by one vote. Going there on the bus because he didn't have a car. And so we'd take the 25 Jefferson down to the Woodward. And, he went and presented the art and I waited downstairs in the lobby and he didn't get it by one vote.
Damn, that's like that's like a pursuit of happiness type story. Shit.
Like I remember those things of him like going to the old post office that used to be in the Fisher building. In the basement.
I remember in the basement, yeah.
Yep. And you do all the rolling so he could sell his prints. Like I remember those things, like going around town. Like one of the reasons I'm passionate about transit is because there was no car growing up when I was a kid. So if I wanted to go to Belle Isle, it was 25 to the Belle Isle bus. right, or the smart bus or whatever. Like that's just how it was. There wasn't that thing there. When it comes to the community itself, you know, I think Detroit has long suffered from. Many Detroit artists are often revered outside of the city and the region more than they are here.
Yes.
And that's a shame. You know, you can go to New York. You know, you were talking about places of the diaspora, places like vibrant places like Bed-Stuy and things like that. Or you go out west, you see people doing these things.
Yeah, San Francisco. You know, definitely like Los Angeles. I mean, even I've been hearing more about like even artistry in Arizona. It's more included in the culture, whereas I guess Detroit was so blue collar for so long, and to have so many talented people, it seemed like, you know.
Well, there's also that constant force, like push and pull behind, you're an artist, but if you're going to be a professional artist or even like somewhat of a sideline, unless you're just doing it as a thing outside of your job, like we need to support our artists. There needs to be a market for that. Right? Like it's that push and pull of you want to do your art, but also like I think art deserves to be compensated.
Yeah.
And that has to happen. Like that's part of the culture that we have to reinforce, even if it's on a small level. You know, like I was talking to a friend of mine, it's like, well, I did this piece, whatever, and my friend wouldn't give me $5 for it. Come on.
Yeah.
Right? Like what do we value here? We have to ask ourselves that. If we want to step forward and say, you know, population-wise, we're never going to be a number 4, number 5 city again. Right? We're just not. Like, you look at it. I was looking at a thing the other day because I'm going to Bed-Stuy in a couple of months again. And I realized that Brooklyn, like, so you hear this thing, right? You heard this too, right? Corktown's a new Brooklyn or whatever. You've heard all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know, Brooklyn is 2.7 million people in an area the size of Warren and Sterling Heights put together. It's 2.7 million people in an area half the size of the city of Detroit. That's about connections. That's about density. That's about energy and momentum. That's what we have to look at here in Detroit, about density, energy, momentum, you know, encouraging people to stay and to grow and to say this is a place that I can be instead of a place that I can save. Right? Like we got to get rid of the savior thing and really look at this is a place I want to put my roots.
Yeah. And it's unique you bring that up. And now we're just like, I guess, getting more into the content world. So after that, I'm guessing grow, school, what high school, what college, what's happening there?
Well, I went to the college, the School of Hard Knocks.
I got you. I got you. All right. So
go ahead.
So high school?
Grosse Pointe South.
Okay. And then after Grosse Pointe South, what do you jump into?
I was the floor manager for Channel 4 News when I was 18 years old.
Okay. How did that connection end up happening?
It kicked so I produced a telethon and raised like 20 grand or something for that through that telethon. And so some people saw me.
Damn.
And it was something where I needed an opportunity to make some money because just there wasn't any.
Yeah.
So I took the job. Like there was nobody to pay for my college. So I had to work.
And so at that time, that's an interesting predicament to get put into because just the pace of television or the pace of broadcast is tough, just radio. But television adds another layer and dynamic to that pace. And what was that like to basically go from high school, which is kind of like, you know, do what you want to do, to like being like you're in
right?
war. Yeah.
Whoop my ass.
I could see that.
Like it just whooped my ass. Like I wasn't good at it. I learned a lot, and over time, as I did other jobs afterward, I got sharper. But it whooped my ass. Like you realize what you have to do to really lock in, and people get into this idea of like content creation of you know, well, you know, I don't feel da da da. If you want to be a professional content creator, whether it's writing, whatever you want to do, you need to get up and do it on the days you don't want to do it. And you know what? When that studio door closes, you have to be ready, and you have to go.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, if you know, as Martha Jean the Queen says, if you really want to make it, do you really want to make it?
Yeah, you got to go. So from that, you kind of are venturing in this world of content creation before we know what content creation is. Where do you go from there?
I mean, I did a lot of like various freelance work. You name it. I did a while for years where I just took every job that was on the road because I hadn't traveled.
Okay.
Whatever, it didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter how horrible it was. It didn't matter how. It didn't matter if I could get not around here to see the country.
So where did you travel during these travels?
You name it. Everywhere from like Los Angeles to Gary, Indiana.
Oh man, good old Gary. Gary, I call Gary it's Indiana's Flint. That's what I call it. But it's also the home of the Jackson 5.
Like Wisconsin to Memphis to, wherever the winds took me, and I really got to enjoy a lot of places. I'm actually really glad that I got to go to Memphis last year again because Detroit City FC made it to the playoffs and they played the team from Memphis. So I was like, I get to go back down there again. Let me tell you, that town reminds me of Detroit in the 90s.
Yeah. I like, I plan on getting down there for a Grizzly game myself sometime soon.
Oh, it's fun.
Morant,
my goodness.
It's some people I know down in Memphis. And then also love blues. So I'm looking forward to that. Amongst that, in these travels, when did these conversations, when did you come into podcasting as far as like, when did you just start listening to podcasts and think, this may be something I want to do?
Oh, geez. When did they first start coming out? Like 05, 04?
Yeah, about 04, 05, right. 04.
So I used to go to work or whatever, and whatever job I was doing, and I had one of those Apple iPod shuffles, the white gum stick, the cheap one.
Yep.
And I'd preload all my shows that I would listen to on that thing because it lasted forever.
So you were like early on listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, because you could listen to things that actually interest you.
Mm-hmm.
The mainstreamification of media had already strongly begun. Like we think now with, the robot DJs and the same station across 50 different markets, whatever. That machine, that horse left the barn a long, long time ago. And so if you were interested in something that maybe was niche commercially viable or viable to an audience that cared about it, that's what you could do. And that's part of the magic that's always been of podcasting is the ability to do something that, when you do mainstream media in a lot of ways, and this, you've got the experience, it's like, okay, here's your 3 minutes.
Yeah,
here's your 6 minutes. This is it. And there's a value to it, but it lacks the depth.
So much context. Like, I think I was early on listening. I want to say I started listening like maybe 06, 07. I would listen for hours and then just over the arc of like, first it was Mark Maron, then it was Bill Burr, and then it's like I would listen and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. You know what I'm saying? Even Rogan, even though it's so weird, it's like Joe Rogan is almost so polarizing to even mention him in podcasts, especially being black. It's like, oh, you listen to him? And I'm like, it's been some interesting, like the deeper dive, long form content gives bigger context. Now, do I agree with any and all of it, what anybody says? No, not at all. I go back and listen to some of my stuff and say, damn, I can't believe I said that shit. But it was unique to feel as though I was in the conversation. So you were listening, and then you would just be working and just
it would fill
kind
the
of
time.
connect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be better than unless there was like a Tigers game on or something like that. It'd be a good way to like fill the time, or while I was doing whatever work, or like I'd work with my I'd do window washing with my uncle on weekends to make extra money, or. You know what I mean? Like
you can throw those on, and you're just in that world, listening to Malcolm Gladwell tell you, or how he got about to, his books and stuff.
Or earlier shows like Freakonomics.
Yeah,
which has
Freakonomics
really been inspiring for me.
Yeah, Freakonomics. I like the book, and then when I got the podcast, I was like, wow, now they're really getting in depth with a lot of the concepts in the books. So, as my econ teachers say, that's pop culture economics. That's what my econ teachers say. But it's an interesting book. If you ever read Freakonomics, it's nothing about sex and everything. It's a lot of stuff.
That's Freakonomics. We should write that book. We'll make double the money.
Exactly. It'd be like the industry of that. But nah, it's an interesting podcast, interesting book. Just looking at percentages and things like that. And it's like, wow, you can pull some good game from these podcasts.
Well, and when it comes to Freakonomics, for me, it's the hidden side of everything is what's interesting to me more than the numbers. It's more of what are the motivations that drive that individual decision? What were the real reasons behind it, as opposed to kind of what the public embraced? And with all those stories, and I think that's really part of what got me is, and especially as like time goes on and you dive into more things and you cover more things and you get more experiences and you realize that there is in fact kind of two things. It's not the conspiracy theory version. Oftentimes the conspiracy theory is off. It's like follow the money. Like, what is the motivation for them to do this? Why do they need to say that? It's like my great aunt would say, never ask someone to vote against their pocketbook. They'll always say no.
Yeah.
You have to convince them that it's in their personal benefit. Now, they'll say on social media, I do this, or they'll say, they'll signal that I'm part of this. But when it comes to that vote, when the curtain closes, they're voting for themselves.
And even more so than that, like, that's why it's so unique to have you here, especially today, and think about this decoding that I plan on getting into, because I'm one to, my interest in marketing and in the storytelling and content. So much of this is conditioning. Like, people, we've been, and we all have this. So like some of these words I use, I think people will put negative connotations to it, like it's saying conditioning or propaganda or something like that, or media even sometimes now, or content, or, the classic one, fake news. Like, all of this has like a semblance and understanding and how, because it's going to hit hearts and minds, and how hearts and minds respond, why you want the hearts and minds to respond the way that they do. And the packaging of that, as you say, like what was behind that motivation, as, as when we think of so many stories, it's rarely as simple as, the way that stories were told to us when we were younger. Because back in the day, like, you have a good guy, a bad guy, and that was pretty much it. Like when I was younger, I remember I was talking about, Christopher Reeves' Superman. Like, that was superhero movies when I was really young. You know what I'm saying? And I remember they come on Channel 20 in reruns, and he's the good guy. Everything was set up. Whereas now it's so many nuances to the way that you see like a Black Adam. And where it's like a hero that's an anti-hero that's doing things you like, but he's doing it in a way where it's still like conflict. Like, it's so many more layers that have been added, though it's still
those
the
layers
basis
were always
is the
there.
same.
Those layers were always there. We just now see them. Let's hit the hot button. You said fake news. Let's hit the hot button. Fake news. The thing is that reporting and journalists often mistake about it. They think that they can like report their way out of fake news. Like, well, I just need to make sure I have my fact or whatever. It doesn't matter about your facts. It's an in-group signaler. It's a signal to say, I am part of this group. When someone says that's fake, that's a flag that's for other people to see that person so they can connect to each other. Like, we're trying to like fact check and whatever. Fact checking doesn't work. Like, you want to present the facts, and that's very key. But you have to understand the motivations.
And that's where like decoding this stuff does come into play, because some of the facts and some of the realities, it can get really tough. At the Detroit Policy Conference, one of the tougher discussions that I was going to have, and we're going to expand more on this, and I'm sure they're going to partner. It's man, it's like, how do I even present this? I'm going to just shoot from the hip. So some of the people I know that work with DTE, and definitely DTE is an entity that it's tough, because the amount of, I know the bills that I'm facing, I know the bills that my neighbors face and what it is, and it is accepted as a natural monopoly in the industry. And the rates will continue to rise. But the reality is, I also understand the business end of this is our infrastructure in Detroit, and just even across America, the infrastructure in America, even with this Build Back Better Act, I mean, you would be living in what I would consider delusion to not recognize that a grandiose plan needs to go into effect. Because not since like FDR's New Deal has there been like a massive focus to improve the qualities of the American infrastructure. And even when FDR did that, you had a different populace of Americans. You had a different way of people looking at work ethic. You had a different commitment to how things would be done versus today, where some of the most expeditious engineering and execution is coming from Nigeria, coming from China, coming from certain places of India, but it definitely not coming from America, because a lot of the focus in America isn't even like to do that type of work. If anything, a person's like, I'm gonna do this skill trade for 5 years, so then I can turn over and do a podcast like Kari. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like, it's a different like mentality. So I'm giving all of this to say some of the nuances, as you say, like when you present facts and how we angle these facts and how we look at things, it takes so much more critical thinking to exercise to go about how to have an understanding for the challenges that we're facing and still understand the challenge of like, look, but it's a family in there with kids, and they need to make sure that they're taken care of, and you're still profitable, even though I know you're worried about it not being profitable because you're thinking that at the end of the day, you know, we don't want to lose profits and lose shareholders.
It's quarterly versus legacy thinking. If you think about Eastern cultures, a lot of Eastern cultures look at things from a legacy point of view. It's all right, let's think in 200-year zones. Let's think about planting seeds for trees that we will not sit under. With the way that everything has become now, it's you have to deliver by the quarter. When you have to make every decision by the quarter, follow the money. Then you end up doing different things than if you have the runway or space to say, we are going to rebuild our electrical infrastructure. Another bill that's coming due, our sewer infrastructure. Billions of dollars is coming due. And here is the deal. Everybody out there on the internet that's angry on Facebook is like, my taxes are too high. They're stealing money. The roads. You know what? The stuff gets old. And at the end of the day, Metro Detroit's population has not grown since the 70s. Yet, what else have we built since the 70s? What else have we vacated since the 70s? All that costs money.
Yeah.
We don't think about that because we think of it in a personal consumer capitalism kind of way. It's my life, my thing. It's not, okay, how do we say that we are going to have yet another plan like electrification was earlier in the last century, to say we are going to make sure that everybody has this access. Everybody has internet access or the opportunity for it. That everybody has like these sewer issues and these flooding issues are absolutely predictable. Every expert knew it was coming.
Yeah.
It was all there, but people didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And one of the challenges as a media creator, and I don't know if you find this challenge, you can talk about something till you're blue in the face, but someone will say, well, I didn't hear it. You didn't talk about it when you did. But they didn't want to hear it. They're not ready to hear that message. And that is the challenge. We have a number of challenges as a country that we need to face, but we have a population that, for a multitude of reasons that are all justifiable within their personal lives, are not ready to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, the sewer lines are another one that I definitely like. You know, here in my neighborhood, and it seems like on new blocks, as people know, like water main breaks will happen more often. Like it's a couple blocks where I just know if it's a snowy, icy day, don't even bother driving down that street because it's going to happen. And then I think of even the you know, you're a Detroit homeowner, so you got that
I have the
letter
by the
where
door.
it said the letter where it's like, you know, hey, guess what, Detroiters? We have this new idea where, you know, the pipeline that goes from your house to the sewer line, just in case, you know, you can get this program for $115 a year. And I know it's $115 now, but I'm sure that in 6 years, that's going to be like a $350 tax on top of everything. And that was something that used to be covered because I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but if the sewer line between your house and the main line outside breaks, that can be tens of thousands of dollars to fix and drudging up. And then also, depending upon how the lines were laid, because that may also involve gas lines being over it, it could also involve a call to DTE as well.
And some of this infrastructure, you know, you think about all the infrastructure under the city that's been there for a century, way over its useful life.
Yeah.
But when you have depopulation or when you have a disinvestment, those things don't get fixed on time.
Yeah.
Right? There isn't that maintenance schedule. And so that's part of the challenge of trying to figure out, like, this is where it's like, okay, you look at things like brownfield tax credits. Yeah, they can be used squirrely, but also sometimes they're absolutely necessary because the stuff hasn't been touched since, 1926. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's this balance that we have to constantly walk because there hasn't been that investment. There hasn't been that wealth building within the community to lift things up. And it'd be one thing if we had sprawled to all these places that we did, and Macomb Township being one of the most popular places to live in Metro Detroit, and we were growing people. It's like, oh well, we need more room or we need more whatever. That isn't the case. We're just and all that just adds mile of stuff that needs to be repaired, and then we can't have discussions because it's politically impossible.
Yeah.
Of what, maybe there are only 3 houses on that block, and maybe we need to reset the infrastructure for what it is.
And it becomes tough because we're dealing with like this brownfield that is a new one, and it's a new form of like, I know, devaluing what my property and other properties and the lawsuit. It becomes
there's squirrely stuff that happens with it.
It becomes tough too because back to like fake news, and it's like, who do you trust? How do you trust anybody? Because in some ways I sometimes feel that the snake eats its own tail here because now when, okay, all right, we're going to allocate $1 trillion to fix something. In the back of our minds, we're thinking, all right, now will the best actors present themselves or will it's $1 trillion over there, let me get my hands on it, actors present themselves? And will they just kick the can? Like it becomes one of the toughest things because you are correct. Like a lot of these infrastructures, these bridges, we're hearing some of these stories about some of these bridges collapsing, how bridges are collapsing, how fast we can fix some of these roads, especially like if you're in certain parts of rural America. It's ways, it's just streets that, it's old school, like, hoping the creek don't rise days in some of these places. And these are tough discussions to have because it still is 2023. Mm-hmm. The messaging now as information is traveling so fast, in certain ways we're like in the Matrix because you're in wherever America, but you're connected to, the Kardashians, the LeBron James, the Tom Brady, Beyonce. Like your world now can be so immersed in something outside because of the advent of the internet. Mm-hmm. But the inside could be a lot worse than what people, don't even know. Because that's what I really do have questions about this infrastructure in this nation and how much longer I think that it will be sustainable.
Well, and the thing is that a lot of times we like to think that the problem is just Michigan or whatever.
No.
But you talk to people in California, you got Ellen DeGeneres doing an Instagram selfie down a creek that's like right next to her, like that's eroding by her creek. Like, you're talking about stars. That's why I brought that up.
Yeah.
Like these issues are across the country. Like we're setting up communities in places with no drinking water.
Yeah.
You look at those reservoirs out west, and some of the recent rains have helped it, but these are the climate patterns now. I mean, this winter, this has been a very warm winter for us.
It's been very warm. It was extremely cold because I know, my birthday's around that time. Usually it's not that cold. And usually, we play by ear. But today it's the middle of January and we're, it's very unusually warm.
I would like to correct you. It is always hot on your birthday.
Like usually I'm able to do something, but it was so cold during that time, and we'll have these dips. And even during those dips, when we talk about infrastructure, I don't know if you remember that one of the last deep freezes we had where it was like maybe 5 degrees and DTE said, look, hey, everybody, can you please, use less of your heat? And I'm like, damn, they really hitting us with that. Mm-hmm. Knowing that most people are going to be like, I'm cranking, and for me, I kind of top out at like, even if it's in the degree, like not even degrees, like if it's that cold, I'm still a 75 guy and bundling up because I'm worried about how much my bill's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, it's that thing where during that time, I remember just going from room to room with my little heater.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like, okay, I'm going to be in this room today, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, because I know how much it all adds up to be. And with big old houses and stuff like that, it just adds up even faster. That gets to things like resources and availability for winterization and home improvements and all those things. People may think that's kind of crazy, but it actually can save hundreds of dollars every year. It can make a huge difference. But again, it's like you got to take care of these things over time. You got to invest over time with it, and you got to have the resources to do that. So it just becomes the circle.
So with that, and we're getting in our zone, but Daily Detroit.
Yeah.
What led you to Daily Detroit?
Well, I thought, I never expected it to be this.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally a project that kind of blew off steam, made it with some friends, had a couple of extra whiskeys at Nancy Whiskey.
There we go.
And was just like, let's make a website.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just turned into writing about things and covering things around town. And, because I'd had more of like a background dealing with media and television journalism and sports and that kind of stuff. And then I had decided to go do corporate work for a while. And I just wanted an outlet. That's all, like with some friends. Like it wasn't like there was no grand strategy. Mm-hmm. But then it just started kind of picking up on Facebook. It started picking up on social media. Said, all right, we'll start taking newsletter subscriptions, and picked up some of that because people want to know what's happening in Detroit, in Metro Detroit, how it all fits together. There is, especially in this digital world, there is more of a need than ever to connect people to their communities, especially in a region like Metro Detroit. And as I've said, and you've said before, like Daily Detroit has a regional focus. And in part, it's for a reason. Like it's something that we feel strongly about covering. It's something that we know well, although the city is the heart of everything going on. It's the beating heart of this region. So it's very important to pay attention to what's happening there. Mother Nature doesn't care about your county line. This all works together. As much as you want to push other things away, like the world is interconnected. And especially in an area like this where, I think about when I go to Chicago, I've been to Columbus or other places and visit people, and like you walk out your door and there's a bunch of things happening. In most of Metro Detroit, that's not the case. In most of Metro Detroit, not only are we sequestered by our digital devices, but we're on a cul-de-sac somewhere. Or we have two privacy fences on either side.
Yeah.
Or whatever. We aren't able to create those, what I like to call happy collisions.
And also, like I always say, with Detroit is different. It's still a very cliquish town. Like in good clicks, meaning like it's whole worlds going on in Detroit that you'll live here your whole life and be like, wow, I had no idea that there was such a rich, Bengali community that exists in Metro Detroit until you connect in that world. And it's like, wow, it's like nothing but Bengali people over here. Like it's like that in a lot of pockets of Detroit.
Yeah, no, I don't know everything, and I'll be the first one to say that. But I think the key is to always be willing to learn something new and have your assumptions challenged. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the fun of this place is like there's always something new. I will never know it all.
Yeah.
And that's humbling and that's beautiful. Like I enjoy that challenge that there will always be something. And so I think it's incumbent upon content creators that are of this place. And I'm not talking about like how it's like structured as a nonprofit or 50 I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is it's not owned by, say, Graham Media or Gannett or something outside where it's clearly something that, although there are local people here, like the money's going, like it's part of a greater thing that's just one pod among a greater thing. When it comes to people who are interested in investing in the Metro Detroit community here, it is incumbent upon us to help connect people together, to highlight stories that, okay, maybe you go try this thing you never tried before. Like, people can slam on doing food coverage, but that's the number one door opener to get people to experience something new.
True.
Right?
Food is food.
It's the start.
Every time you do a poll of what people want, food comes up high.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. We just did an email survey. You know what they want? They want to know about the new stuff. They want to know about the restaurants. They want to know about places they've never been. They want to know about restaurants of different backgrounds that they've never tried. Like that is a way that we experience culture here. And it's a door opener to say, okay, maybe you start here, but then maybe you look at something else, and then maybe you look at this. It's a journey.
Yeah, you
can't go from like 0 to 100.
Yeah.
That's not how humans work.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So with that, you've grown to do so much more now with Daily Detroit. Just like Detroit is different. Like I look to, we're some of the originals in this space in podcasting with a Detroit title, and then shout out to my podfathers, IT and the D. That's how we met through them.
Oh yeah.
Where do you see things going? Because also, like for a while, it was heating up where everybody was getting into it. Certain people were, falling back like usual. You're still in your content world. I'm still in my content world. What do you see coming down the pipeline?
There's going to be a bigger challenge for us because a lot of the legacy outlets don't have a business model anymore.
Yeah.
They've been having layoffs. They've been, stretched out different things. Also, the way that people consume content has changed.
True.
Whether it's short form video, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram Reels, whether it's YouTube, like the world isn't changing. It has changed, and it will always change, but it has changed. And so if we want to preserve that, if we want to share those stories, then it's going to be time for all of us to level up in order to be able to fill that gap in a variety of communities. And hopefully there's more. Like, I don't look at very much as competition whatsoever.
No.
I really don't. And I know that's like maybe it's my hippie parent way of thinking of things.
No, but I think that's why we connected so well, because like people would be like, oh, Detroit is different, Daily Detroit. Wouldn't you be no, not at all. Like, I saw him at the event and it's like, oh, what up? It's all love, because in this content world, we recognize that through the niche, we can interview the same person and it's not going to be the same story.
And shouldn't be.
Both will be something you need to listen to get all angles of whoever it is you're trying to get an understanding of.
And that's why the door is always open to, we've had all kinds of outlets on our show before, local, national, whatever, because here's the thing. I think one thing that we need to do in this generation of content is make sure that those authentic voices and your perspective is shared. Because one thing about, like, people talk about why they don't trust media, and there's this whole distrust of media and this and that. And if you think about it, there was an example. I don't know if you saw this. Do you see the lady that slipped into the reporter in Boston that slipped into her Boston accent on Twitter? Like, she was doing a news report and all of a sudden it was like Warsh or something like that.
Yeah, I saw
and
that.
Everybody had a good laugh, right?
Yeah.
But to me, that kind of gets to the authentic, like,
how
why people
she
don't
should.
trust us.
Yeah, she shouldn't sound like here's like me and my anchor voice. You know what I'm saying? This is my regular Kari Frazier speaking voice, but anchor voice would be like, "Hello, here today. We're talking to the founder of Daily Detroit. Daily Detroit is such a," and it's like, I don't talk like that.
No, you don't, and I appreciate that. But the scary thing is, I talk like this, just louder with more gin.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we have to be who we are, and through the sincerity, and that's what I think a lot of people miss with some of the people with the larger podcast followings, whether that be a Burr or, Marin slowed down and changed around, but like,
it's still
to
him though.
grow
It's
that,
still him.
it's still, but in that journey, and that's the cool thing. Like I tell people, like, even a bad episode is a good episode for the person that follows as a fan, because I'm with you on the journey. It's more sincere. I feel connected to you, whereas a lot of the other information that I'm getting, it feels so, it doesn't even deliver, like, because my critical thinking is always like, man, like you say, it's like they gave me three minutes of a, house fire on the east side and everyone was saved. And it's like, okay, it's, now critical thinking goes into my mind, thinking that we have one of the largest cities in America. There are probably, I would imagine, maybe on an average day, 50 fires a day. What stood out about this fire? Back to another infrastructure thing. I'm very aware that they're checking these fire hydrants in and around the city. Like, was the fire hydrant there? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking so much stuff when I get, as you say, like the blurb story. Even if it's the feel good story. Even if it's, hey, this kid decided to sell cookies so that he could send his basketball team on a field trip because they won the opportunity to meet, I don't know, LeBron James or something. It's like, okay, there are so many other feel-good stories. What stood out about this feel-good story? Like, I'm decoding all this stuff.
And, so often, you talk about that, so often it's about what's easiest for the person to cover.
Yeah.
Right? If you think about it from a PR perspective, make it easier for people to cover. That's one thing even I think about, like, people say, well, my restaurant needs to get this or that. Make it easy for someone to cover you. Well, same thing with those fires. It was the one that came up on the scanner, and they're like, all right, I can drive to this one fast enough to get to it. Now, there might be additional hooks to it, whatever, but, there's so much of a deadline pressure in that, and there's so much that just has to get filled in that time. And it's a hard job. It's a really hard job to do, but it's also one where you have to just keep things, you lose a little bit of the context. And so one of the things I wanted to mention with you was we were talking about different voices and making sure that they're heard. One thing that's really frustrating for me is a lot of times people will say, well, we want to bring someone on for their voice or their perspective, and then they neuter that perspective.
Yeah.
They say, well, you can't speak like that, or you can't add your personal experience to it. When it's that personal experience that helps people trust you. So you think about, okay, so here's one thing. You look at all these cable news outlets, right? Everyone's like CNN, Fox, da-da-da-da. You know who has more listeners or more viewers almost every single day than cable news outlets with tons of employees and all these millions of dollars?
I don't know.
Phil DeFranco. He'll do more than 1 million views on a thing. And you know what? Not that many people actually watch cable news. And so he's one of the most influential voices about entertainment news, mainstream news, that kind of thing. People who just follow him. He doesn't hide his biases. He tells you what they are. And that builds trust with the audience. And he also delivers it in a fast format, getting people to think about things and go on to the next thing. Or they'll go deeper with something.
And that's where, like, I mean, me and, because it's funny, because at the policy conference, Craig Foley was there too, former host of Detroit Today, NPR, and we even spoke a little bit about the whole concept of free speech. Has this been more of a topic? And I'm one, this may be my hip hop background. I'm all for it. So, and then it's like, nah, but what about hate speech? And da-da-da. I'm like, I have the critical thinking skills where I do believe I'm not so triggered, though I understand certain people can be so triggered from seeing a person that they're not even willing to even entertain anything a person says. I understand that. I'm not in that boat. I'm in the boat of, I want it. Please give it to me. Please deliver that to me because I want to hear the perspective, because suppressed thought process, if anything, I think brings out more of the challenges in our society, because these people still feel and think the way they think. They're just suppressing it. And that, to me, becomes more dangerous.
It's like one of my friends says, I'd rather just know you're an asshole.
True indeed.
Right? Because it's something where when everybody puts it all underneath the lid, and there obviously, when it comes to some professional situations, and you have to do certain things, right?
Yeah, depending upon what you're representing.
And what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
But when you're working with something where, you're interviewing someone or something like that, people can tell when the limiter's on it. When people are not sharing their full selves, or even if a story is about a specific thing, or they're like hedging on their answers, when people don't lean in all the way. And I think that it's important to have people share these things out there. Now, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences.
And that's also what I say too. It's like one of those things where if you say some shit, it's going to cause a lot of people not to like you. It's going to cause a lot of backlash. It's going to cause many consequences. But at least we know where you stand. And knowing where you stand, it can be so beautiful for me. But I also, I'm willing to entertain for others. Like, it can be, difficult for them to even know that. So, it's almost like, like a realm of reality. Like, what I'm watching on Twitter is they say, one day after all the bans, the N-word went up in usage 700,000%. And it's like, yeah, possibly. But, if some bigot wants to use the term, I'd rather know the bigot is using the term than for the bigot to use African American all the time. For me, it's like, wouldn't that be better than sitting around and wondering, like, okay, is it not? Maybe so. It's one of those things where, this is the reality because that was the same user.
Or even when it comes to something that is not as offensive but still is very problematic.
Yeah.
sometimes also it's incumbent to hear those things so that they can be checked. And what I mean by checked is my fellow white people should never be asking like you, like, what did I do wrong? It's on us to check.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, you might want to consider, like, you need to reconsider that. Like, you need to understand that. I think there is this burden that's placed on everybody. Like, well, what did I do wrong? Well,
But
that's not on you to answer, right? Go do some work.
and I'm the black guy that sometimes will have that discussion because I'm willing to lean into a discussion that somebody else wouldn't want to have. Because if
And
it
it's
wasn't
wonderful
for
you
women,
are, but-
and I don't expect everybody to be.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's wonderful you are
Yeah.
if that's what you want to do, but that should not be the
No, it's
expectation
not,
because
yeah.
that is unfair labor.
I agree, but if it weren't for someone to at least open up some of those doors, because I know I've learned so much more about the LGBTQIA experience, about the women experience, about even in aging in that experience, like just from having conversations with people, so many things in culture and religion. Like if it wasn't for me sitting and talking for hours about, with somebody that grew up in, from Catholic church to Catholic school to religion and understanding the system of the parish system, then I would just only have a media understanding of what this meant and what that priest represents, what the Pope means. And that perspective is definitely not going to be any perspective that would be, right now, it would be nothing but negative. But in understanding, and then even also understanding the ties of the way that banner, like when people say, like, the sun never set on Great Britain, the sun never really set on the Catholic Church. You know what I'm saying? And the way that it influenced and has systems that run across the world.
Or even times in history when it was pseudo-government or government.
Exactly.
Right, that's the other thing to realize is that there are large parts of history where that was government. Now, we've learned a lot. We hopefully have moved in a way where we understand more and can be more accepting. One of the hardest challenges is when you run into people who have such held beliefs that they have to make sure that you believe it too. And that's where we can get into real problems.
That right there is definitely
Like,
one of the things
that's you live how you want to live, but don't affect me.
And that was definitely one of the biggest things of many of the Judeo-Christian religions. It's that demonstrative attitude of everything else is of evil, and any other way of this is wrong, and I hate you because of it. That dogmatic way of thinking, connected to so much violence has brought about so many atrocities.
Right, and there's dogmatic thinking that there, and in multiple religions and things.
Oh, most definitely.
Where you're sitting there and you're just like, you don't even know somebody like that. Like you've never met someone.
Yeah.
Like that. Like how can you already pass that judgment? And and that's the thing that for me is sometimes difficult. But I also understand that we all have to share. Like I can't, like, despite whatever is on social media, like you can't, like we all have to live together. Like in some proximity, one way or another. We're all here, so we need to somehow figure out a way to forward, or else this is just going to continue to be a shit show.
Yeah, most definitely. So with that being said, classic Detroit is different as we close out. Your very first car, year, make, and model, what year you get it?
My first car I ever had, Plymouth Acclaim. I called it the Corpse because it died every Thursday.
Hilarious.
It was like the fancy K car. Bought it for very little. It was, but you know what? It was mine, and I appreciate it.
Okay, where was the first place you went when you got it?
Oh geez, I went for pizza.
There we go.
I was like, I'm getting pizza when I want to get pizza.
Okay, ain't that something? Hopefully a good slice, good Detroit style slice. I'm glad the Detroit style pizza is taking the world by storm now. And you're the DJ at the end of the fireworks, Woodward and Jefferson. You get to play a song. What song you playing?
Oh geez. I'm going to go with Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell, Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
Okay, I like it. You're going to have the people dancing and like swaying a little bit. Last one. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
Ooh, this is tough. Hazen Pingree.
Okay.
Potato Patch Pingree.
Okay. That's the same thing Devin said. So why do you pick him?
It was the beginning of an idea that a politician is for the people. The idea that of not only self-sustaining, but we're also going to help you. You know, there's this thing that I often hear, like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I kind of get it, but one of the challenges is that we need to be a community that provides boots and straps.
You got that right.
And that's the thing, is like planting your potato garden, doing these kind of things, fighting for, streetcars. They were arguing about transit 120 years ago. Mm-hmm. We're still talking about it today. Mm. But it's that step forward of saying, okay, we are going to be the city of the future. And I think that if we play our cards right, we'll be the city of the future again.
Let's do it. Thank you so much.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.